you see yourself in 5 years?
Prison.
Well, that sure did not age well at all. Hello, everyone, and welcome on back into the Barretts. Today, all jokes aside, we are talking a very serious manner, as if you did not hear, last month on May 31st, Mr. Creepy Motherfucker Danny Masterson is convicted of, and I'm going to be saying the word because A, it needs to be said, and B, I don't make money from YouTube, so demonetizing this video does not matter to me, of raping 2 women when he was 21 or in his 20s, early 20s, I believe, in 2001, 2003. He has been convicted. He did go through 2 trials. The first one, if you have not heard about this, he had to have a retrial because the jury was hung on all 3 counts. Now, you're probably wondering, if this is 2001 and 2003, this is like 20 years ago. How in the world is he being tried for rape on a 20-year-old case? Well, usually the statute of limitations, and I would like to preface this as I'm not a lawyer. The statute of limitations for I believe, actual rape counts is between a certain time period, if not a few years, to 6 might be the maximum. I'm not quite sure, at least for criminal charges. But the way this has been charged against him was for forcible rape. So it's not really 2 counts, it's more like it's forcible rape, so it's a bit different. Still rape, but it's a different criminal charge that the prosecution brought against him. And this is criminal charges. The 3 women that have come forward have also been putting up a civil suit against him, so it's not just the criminal case that they have won. It is also a civil case that has yet to start. Usually civil cases take a lot longer compared to criminal cases. So what has happened? Well, back in 2001, 2003, allegedly, but now he's been convicted, Danny Masterson would drug his victims, as well as force himself upon them, and while they were, I believe one was asleep and one was a longtime girlfriend. I think that it was Jane Doe number 3. And you're probably wondering, well, why hasn't this been televised? Well, like the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp case was televised. Well, it is to protect the privacy of the 3 women who have come forward. Nobody knows their names. If you know them, you know them. If you were in the court case, you know them. But only a certain limited amount of people could be in the proceedings to watch, as well as they were not allowed to record anything, take pictures, have 0 phones. It is all to protect the Jane Doe's identities, which is, I believe, right. Because if this did not come out in the prosecution's favor, the press and the media and the general public would have a field show with the amount of crap they would be saying about these poor women. I also believe Danny Masterson probably didn't want it televised as well because he would know that he wouldn't have won the court of public opinion, which is extremely huge. Just because if he would win it with the jury doesn't mean he would win with the court of public opinion. Certainly, his reputation would be tarnished, and he knows this. So, I think on both fronts, that is why this was not televised, and only a certain amount of news outlets and journalists were allowed into the court proceedings to watch the case unfold, and still by then, not every little bit of detail of the case has come out. So just go ahead and read through this article. A Los Angeles jury has convicted actor Danny Masterson of 2 counts of rape in a retrial that focused on the allegations. He raped 3 women between 2001 and 2003. The verdict did side with 2 of his accusers, of 2 of the Jane Does, but the panel was unable to reach a verdict on a similar allegation from his longtime girlfriend of Masterson. I believe there has been some details that have come out that the forcible rape that they were doing was or going from, she was not awake whatsoever for the rape. I believe to set up the forcible part of it, they she would describe that he would pull her hair a lot. But I think the reason why the longtime girlfriend was hung, it wasn't that they said not guilty, it was a hung jury. Was because of the fact that it might have been because of the hair pulling. Might have just not flown with the forcible part of it. I'm not quite sure. Again, some of the details have not been fully released. He is arrested, so right now he is sitting in jail. He is not out on bail. For the entire court proceedings, he was out on bail, but now after the trial was concluded, the judge found him as a threat to society, and instead of letting him stay out on bail until sentencing, which is not until, I believe, until August, he is sitting in jail right now. He faces up to a minimum, and now this is a minimum. This is not the maximum. I believe this is the minimum. He faces up to, as a minimum, of 30 years in prison when he is sentenced. This is a minimum because he got the minimum for both convictions were 15 years for each one. If he was out on, if all 3 were to happen, we're at 30. He would have been facing 45 years minimum in prison. The max is life if the judge decides to give him the max, but the minimum is 30 because 15 years for each charge. The second trial made the Church of Scientology. I'm not going to get into the Church of Scientology. I don't understand the Church of Scientology. I don't like it. I don't know the full things that go on in the Church of Scientology. I believe it is cultish-like. Don't know why I was saying cultish-like. I don't like the Church of Scientology, especially for what they did to the victims, which he is a member of and a prominent element. Here's the key elements of the trial. The actor will remain in custody while he awaits sentencing. I think it has been scheduled. It's, I believe, August. The when Masterson's convicted victim could give victim impact statements during the sentencing hearing, and the judge would like to hear from Masterson's supporters. I don't know who would be his supporters. Probably his wife, his family, maybe his like team from, maybe his PR team even. I don't know, but definitely his wife will be one of them. I hope they give victim impact statements. I know it's very hard as someone who's going into the field of victim advocacy. I know that victim impact statements and facing your abuser, your rapist, everything like that is hard. It is extremely difficult and hard to do. If they can't physically speak to him themselves in court, I hope they let the victim advocate to do it for them, because you've already testified. You've gone this far. You've told your story. You got him convicted. Tell him what you did. Tell him how you feel. And if you cannot do it and face him in that type of way where you're very vulnerable, and this time there's nobody trying to poke holes in your story, and there's nobody there that can try and spin it a different way to put in his favor. I hope they find the courage to give this man a victim impact statement and tell the judge and the court exactly what that man made them feel, what he did, and how horrible of a man he is, because he deserves it. If not, I hope that they will let the victim advocate speak, because this could easily sway the judge to give him more time in jail because of it. So, of course, we'll definitely hear from his supporters. Masterson's lawyer didn't address the verdict immediately after it happened, but liked to appeal. Wouldn't surprise me if they would appeal. He has the money to do it. Direct discussion of drugging. So this is where he would, of course, give his victims the date rape drug. A judge in the second trial allowed the prosecution to say directly that Masterson drugged all 3 women before raping them, which is huge. That is probably what may have swayed the jury this time compared to the first trial, and what made the biggest difference from the first trial. Previously, the drugging could only be implied when the women testified to feeling disoriented, losing memory, and going unconscious to a degree that could not be explained by the alcohol they had consumed. The defendant drugs his victim to gain control. He does this to take away his victim's ability to consent. Deputy District Attorney Ariel Anson told jurors, I don't know if I said that last name right, told jurors during her closing argument May 16th. This is huge. Huge. The judge wouldn't do it in the first trial. Don't know why. I don't understand it. But I'm glad the second judge allowed them to say that. I believe it would be a fact and that it could be argued. The defense says there is no such evidence beyond the women's stories, and suggested the prosecution was using the stories because of the absence of evidence of any force or violence. Defense attorney Philip Cohen made clear to jurors that there is no drugging charge because it was 20 years ago. You can't bring a drugging charge when you don't have the substance abuse. If this was more recent, they could probably bring up the drugging charge. But the date rape drug is still a fact. If they were feeling disoriented and losing memory and going unconscious, and it wasn't from the alcohol, then you could arguably say, yes, he gained control by drugging them. I think that's a very valid argument, especially in this case being so old. There is going to be no evidence. Why is there no evidence? Because this was a 20-year-old case. If they were allowed to come forward and wasn't so scared of not only him being famous, but also the Church of Scientology coming after them, then there would have been abundance of evidence that would have brought back their story. But I believe, in my opinion, that 3 of them coming forward like this is huge. That implicates something against Danny Masterson. It wasn't just a one-off person that waited for so long, that didn't have any evidence, but the fact that there's 3 of them, I believe, in my opinion, that is evidence enough to give him charges for rape. Because it wasn't just a one anomaly thing, even if you would want to say it like that. It was 3 different women in 3 different parts of his life, and one was a long-term girlfriend that could all corroborate their story together. It's huge. I believe it even without the evidence of the alcohol, of drugging, of bruising, of anything like that. Even if they didn't take pictures or go to the hospital for any signs of discomfort or bruising or anything, just them all 3, that is a pretty damning evidence. It's not just one. A bigger role for Scientology. I did hear in this case, in the second trial, they really honed in on the Scientology thing. The Church of Scientology loomed large at Masterson's trial. It played a bigger role in his retrial, which Judge Charlene Almedo, I'm not sure if I'm saying that last name right, aligned as testimony on Scientology that she denied the first time. That is huge. Masterson is a prominent member of the church. All 3 of his accusers are former members who grew disillusioned with the institution in the aftermath of the alleged assaults, saying that the church officials told them what had happened to them was not rape, and that is awful. Fuck you, Scientology, for telling them that, and that its policies prevented them from going to police. That's bullshit. Sorry, that's bullshit. No church if you want to call it that, because it's not, would stop people from going to the police. Scientology said in a statement that the church has no policy prohibiting or discouraging members from reporting criminal conduct of anyone. Scientologists are not to law enforcement, and that it explicitly demands Scientologists abide by all laws of the land. Sure. You'll say that now. You didn't say that back then to them. You made them scared. And also not in the fact that it was Danny Masterson, your upcoming star. So, yeah, of course you wouldn't want them to commit anything. He was young and a rising star in Scientology and becoming a known actor. Of course you didn't want him to be alleged of rape when it actually happened. Of course not. Why would you? The prosecution's expert Claire Headley was a former official in Scientology leadership who became a staunch church foe, suing it in 2009 over her experience. A federal court rejected claims from Headley and her husband, saying they had not provided enough evidence that the church had engaged in forced labor and violated human trafficking laws. Oh, that's disgusting. And that they had many chances to lead the leadership group known as the Sea Org, and appeals court upheld the decision. That is disgusting, if that is true. The church said after the verdict that the prosecution's introduction of religion to this trial was an unprecedented violation of the First Amendment and affects the due process rights of every American. The church has no party in this case, and religion did not belong in this proceeding. Yes, it does, especially if the church was threatening these women to not go forward and go to the authorities because of fear. They were scaring them. They may say now in front of the court of law that, oh, we don't do that, that there is no policy, but we all know in that fine writing there is that policy. So don't play coy. Do not play fucking coy. Church of Scientology. The defendant, who's a piece of shit. Masterson, 47, actor since childhood, died as major break when he was cast as Stephen Hyde on the retro sitcom That 70s Show, which I will not ever be watching again. I cannot look at this fucker's face at all, knowing what he did, especially since it was around that time that show was shooting. I cannot watch that show ever again. She also starred Ashton Kutcher, Mila Kunis, and Topher Grace, and would run on Fox from 1998 to 2006. At the time of the alleged assaults, his career was at its peak, and his house near Hollywood with a backyard pool and jacuzzi was a social hub. It was also, according to prosecutors, the scene of all three crimes. Masterson had pled not guilty, and his lawyers have repeatedly denied all of the allegations. The first accuser. One of the women Masterson convicted of raping was born into a Scientology family and was part of Masterson's circle of friends. Nearly all of those closest to her were members, including the late Lisa Marie Presley. I did not know she was a part of that. Who also the church long before her death in January. Rest in peace, Lisa Marie Presley. The woman said that when she stopped by Masterson's house to pick up a set of keys in 2003, he gave her a drink that left her sick and badly disoriented and raped her in his bedroom upstairs. She first filed a police report, which did not lead to an arrest. Shocker. That it did not lead to an arrest, because it's Danny Masterson, well-known star now. In 2004, she returned to authorities in 2016. So again, you have that police report that does back up the victims. Say, hey, I made this police report, but the cops didn't do anything about it, which is awful. And she did again in 2016. Jurors found her account credible and convicted Masterson based on her allegations. The Associated Press does not typically name people who say they were victims of sexual abuse. Also because they probably have a protective order, so you cannot name them anyway. The second accuser, a model and actor who was Masterson's girlfriend from 1996 to 2002, took the stand to open the trial. She previously testified that Masterson grew increasingly physically and sexually abusive in their years together. She said that it eventually led him to raping her twice late in 2001. Awful. Though he was only charged with one instance, a morning she woke to find Masterson raping her. She would go to police 15 years later. Jurors could not agree on a verdict on her allegations, deadlocking 8-4 in favor of conviction. I believe this is the one where they were trying to, so she was asleep for one, she woke up in the middle of another one, again, super awful in both instances. I guess even on the one they couldn't come to a decision. There's probably more details into what she said in her testimony, but again, it's not fully released. Still, this is the one where they did not come back on conviction. It was deadlocked. Could they retrial just her case again against him? They could if they felt like they felt like they could win it. But I think with 2 times of retrials on her specific case, I think I think there's a statement from Jane Doe number 2 that she's gonna pursue it civilly with the other 3, because they all 3 jointly filed a civil case against him. So he's not done with trials. So she may not retry her case. The prosecution may not retry her case. So I think she's just gonna pursue it civilly to get her justice, and I hope she does. I truly do. The third accuser, the third woman at the center of the trial, had only recently met Masterson through mutual friends in the church, which she had joined as a teenager. She testified that in 2003 that Masterson invited her to his house, where they were alone. She said she was clear that she wanted no sex, but he convinced her into his jacuzzi, then took her to his bed where he raped her. She went to police in 2017. Jurors convinced Masterson based on her testimony. Investigation and arrest. Police revealed they were investigating Masterson in March 2017. Hollywood's Me Too firestorm would begin about 6 months later. In the midst of Masterson would be written off the ranch. That was another. I don't know about. I never watched that show, so I have no idea. Comedy where he had reunited with Ashton Kutcher. He was arrested and charged with 3 rapes in 2020. In 2020, when a judge ruled the evidence was strong enough for him to be tried. And then the first trial, Masterson's month-long first trial, began last October. Masterson, free on bail, was accompanied to court by a large group of friends and family with ties to both Scientology and the entertainment industry, including his wife and mother of his child, actor and model Bijou Phillips. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I have no idea. And in the end, fewer than half of jurors voted to convict on any of the counts. Nevertheless, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office decided to try again with the new set of jurors, and the men agreed to take the stand again, which is extremely powerful of them to do. It's hard to do it the first time. It's even harder to do it the second time. But at least the second time, you know exactly what to expect and how much of a shit show it can be. So that is the article on just basically the synopsis of this awful motherfucker, and I'm hoping he gets the maximum. I'm hoping he gets more than 30 years. Either way, when he gets out, he's 47. He won't be getting out till he's at least 80. If, unless they let him out on parole for good behavior. Again, that will be more so talked about at sentencing. I hope he doesn't get let out on parole for good behavior. More than likely he will because of this extent of the crime. But overall, I'm glad he got convicted. I am. I think this guy is the scum of the earth. I think this guy is awful. And I will definitely not be watching that 70s show ever again. The reboot is to be questionable, but his hide is not even mentioned in the reboot, which I'm glad about. I think Netflix wants nothing to do with this man ever again, and I am glad, and I hope he stays in jail for the rest of his life. I hope he serves the whatever time he has to serve, the 30 years, if he gets maximum, if he gets life without parole. I don't think they're not going to do parole. I think they will. I think the minimum is 30 years, and he could get out on good behavior with parole. Who really knows? We won't know until sentencing begins. But I am incredibly proud of these women who came forward and decided to tell their story after so long. It takes a lot, and I think that they had, because it was not just the one, it was the three. I think that definitely strengthened their case against Danny Masterson, and I think that the three had not come together to do this, I don't think he would have been tried and convicted on just one of them individually. I think because it was the three of them, I think that's why it was so powerful and why I believe the second set of jurors and what the judge allowed in the second time made a huge difference. I think the first trial, the judge was keeping certain things out of the way, certain things coming in and being put on trial. I think now that they have seen what they can be let in, and they let in some things that they did in the first trial, and that made a huge difference. Of course, is he gonna try and appeal? Obviously, he's gonna appeal. He has the money to appeal. Could he win on his appeal? Who knows? On what grounds? Honestly, who knows? I'm not a lawyer, so I would not even begin to speculate. Could they argue the whole, well, it wasn't let in on the first trial, it was let in on the second trial, this evidence and blah 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 blah. Could he argue that? Could I see him arguing that in his appeal? Yes. I think that will definitely be a part of his appeal process. But this man is a piece of shit, and I hope he rises to him. I think definitely this case needs to be covered more, and I definitely want to know the more details of testimony, not the intimate details, but just the overall details instead. This small synopsis, because it's very vague and it's kind of hard to tell. Okay, but how did we get to this point where the jury could confidently say this verdict, and why didn't they do it on his longtime girlfriend, where she claims that there's 2 instances? I would like to see some more information come out, but I don't think that will come out for a while. It's probably going to be sealed to protect them, which is perfectly fine. Even if they release the sealed version of it, but take out their instances of their names, I think that'd even be better. But whatever can protect these women from Scientology people to come harp on them, and even Danny Masterson fans to come and threaten them and said their accusations were baseless and it shouldn't have been tried because it's 20 years ago and stuff like that. That is incredibly wrong, in my opinion. And this was a tough case. I mean, this is of course 20 years ago, so you don't have the evidence of drug looking for drugs and substances in your blood and your toxication, tox screenings is what I'm trying to say. You don't have that anymore, so that's gone. You don't have what could be rape kits. You don't have the if they went to the hospital and had reported bruising or any other discomfort, or any injuries that they could have had. You don't have. They could still have that, but if they didn't because they were scared, then they wouldn't have that. So to see them get the conviction on at least 2 out of the 3 counts, I'm so glad that they did for those victims. Those women deserve that and deserve the justice that they needed to put this man behind bars. And his career is done. You will not be seeing this man if he comes back out and tries to get back into the acting business. Because ain't nobody gonna want him. Ain't nobody. He is a convicted criminal now. I would love to see more coverage of this case by other people. I think this case is hugely important for victims to be confident, even though it's 20 years later. And, one of them showed the reports that they did go and report this one after it happened, and again in 2016, and just nobody pursued it. So I'm glad now people are listening to these victims and coming forward, and this trial is huge for victims. It's major. It's absolutely major. But yeah, I think that is gonna be it for me for today for this coverage of this case. I will be updating when his sentencing comes through and what happens and my opinion on his sentencing. I would love to hear from an article that the women came forward and did a victim impact statement, or let the advocate speak for them. And I hope he gets a longer sentencing than the minimum. I don't want him to just get the minimum. I think he deserves either a few, like 10 or 15 more years, or even life. Maybe with the chance of parole if good behavior. But if he serves the 30 years without parole, he won't be getting out of prison until he's in his 80s. And he deserves it. He absolutely deserves it. This man is a disgusting piece of trash. Scum of the earth. And I kind of hope Netflix doesn't even pay him royalties for that 70s show. I don't think that's going to be a thing. But he doesn't deserve any money from his previous gigs at all. What if they do? If he does, it should all go to restitution to these women, 1,000%. And I will also be following the civil case, as that proceeds into trial, if I can. So when the civil case comes through, I'm definitely gonna be covering that as well. Danny Masterson, you are the scum of the earth, man. I hope you rot. I hope you really do rot. I hope you guys learned something about this whole entire case. Like I said, it wasn't a great synopsis of what probably happened, but it's a synopsis nonetheless. It's just a snippet of what actually happened, and I'm glad the court is protecting the identity of these women, because the internet is ruthless, and for people who stand by Danny Masterson or anybody in Scientology who stand by Scientology and believe these women are lying or whatever the case may be, that some people will spout out nonsense of, I'm glad their identities are protected and they don't have to face they don't have to see their names and being barraged by people on the internet who truly don't understand these types of cases and more importantly, victims. I'm not saying to believe every single victim. Obviously, circumstances are different. I'm not saying that every victim needs to be believed. I'm saying that victims should be heard and victims should have their day in court to show you why their story is to be believed and what they experienced is to be believed. And if they're lying, you're making it worse for the women who are afraid to come forward because of you. And these women were absolutely not lying. What happened to them is awful. And I'm glad they got to speak up and had the courage to speak after so many years. And not do it just once, but twice for a retrial. That takes a lot of courage. And they were willing to do that because they wanted to see justice served. And they got it. And I hope the woman, the longtime girlfriend of him, I truly hope that she gets to get her justice as well through the civil court. I truly do. She 1000% needs justice as well. Not just two, all three of them need it. So, until then, you guys can check out more of my true crime stuff. I'll have a link to the last true crime video I have done. I'm gonna try and get back into doing more true crime stuff because again, it is a passion of mine. It is something that needs to be talked about, and going into victim advocacy, things like this need to be out there more for people to see, so victims have the courage to come out and tell their story. It is incredibly important. Until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you all again in the barracks very soon.